First of all, the reason we're dealing with this and exploring this as a service innovation lab is, of course, if you want to build integrated services, you need to actually integrate rules. We very quickly figured that there are only 3 ways to do this. The first one is to re-hard code those rules into yet another system. That's not sustainable. It's workable, but it's not sustainable. The second one is you take all the business rules engines out there that agencies already have and try to create a translation layer. Nightmarish, immense proportions, but doable. So the third option that we're exploring, and it is an exploration and it's still hypothetical, is if legislation was available as code in the first instance, and we're not talking about all legislation, we're not talking about justice systems, we're not talking about case law. We're talking about prescriptive rules that inform services, so eligibility criteria, calculations, those kinds of things. Potentially even obligations around certain areas of compliance, such as AML/CTF. There are certain areas that this seems to work, and the full report, the Better Rules report that and the little discovery we did there is worth looking at for the nuance about what we think it does or doesn't apply to. But as a service delivery entity, we basically identified if the rules from legislation were available as code, then you can take those rules, supplement them with your additional agency policy rules, supplement them with any other observed practice rules, and then you actually get the rules applied and integratable for services that actually span agencies. There are so many rules that go across many acts, across many jurisdictions, and when you start thinking about international trade, you start thinking about international IP, regulations, you start thinking about a huge number of rules. It is more critical than ever in our mind, not just to do service delivery in an integrated way, but also to understand the complexity of the world and the impact on you, that those rules are more programmatically available in a consistent format that isn't up to your interpretation as an organisation. So from our perspective, that's why we're exploring legislation as code, which entirely flips the paradigm, because everyone starts from I'll just make it really human readable and then my machine can interpret it, but then my machine, your machine, your machine, your machine are all going to interpret it subtly differently, and none of that is good for the end user. None of it's good for citizens, none of it's good for democracy. So how we came to thinking about AI is 2 reasons. We started looking at the future of service delivery, realised very quickly that better websites and apps is not where service delivery is going, even in the short term. The idea of a personal AI, you know, we're already starting to see those uses with Siri and such, and Google and Echoes, Amazon Echoes, but a personal AI that is actually open source and tethered to me and my interests, not provided by Google or government, but something that can interface with government, with organisations, with companies, with with my family, with the players that actually play a role in me and my well-being and my family's well-being, is a whole different paradigm for service delivery. But it means that I can have a personalised service that could be voice only, could be high resolution, could be a hologram, whatever my personal preference for accessibility or interaction is, my personal AI can give me that form of interaction, and then suddenly the whole world becomes accessible to everyone under the terms that they consider important to them. So that gets very interesting. So that's this journey that we've come from. That's why we're looking at this. I'll quickly cover 2 other concepts. We've seen the use of AI and combined with virtual reality to get demographically representative public consultation and public development of legislation in Taiwan in real time. It's a thing called Holopolis. We highly recommend it. We'll put the link out on Twitter, but Holopolis is a fascinating use of AI for democratic engagement and live legislative drafting, which was quite an amazing use that we've seen. The concept of government as a platform is a huge part of this. If government as a huge influencer is able to make its rules, its data, its code, its data models more transparent, then you can actually integrate it with other things. Just talking about the deficit data, we've just recently come across the work of Mike Tatoko, and who are working with 4 iwi, so that they have sovereignty over their own data, and then they can use their own data to help inform and model policy to then feed back into government policy development. That starts to explore a different model of collaboration and co-design into the future. So the final thing I'll quickly say is that I've come from Australia, if you haven't got the accent. There is a recent cautionary tale called Robo-Debt. If you haven't seen it, Google it, it will horrify you. The use of basic automation and machine learning to try to tell a whole bunch of people that have received social benefits that they owe the government money. Now, it was not 80% inaccurate, as it turns out. So it actually just created a huge amount of stress and pain for a lot of our most vulnerable people in Australia. To me, that's the cautionary tale. Internationally, we know most governments are watching that case with great interest and trying to make sure they do all the things to avoid that. Here in New Zealand, let's not do that. It's not just about good service delivery or transparency or accountability, it's about human rights. It's about not just social license, but social contract. And finally, I think that if we want to do this properly, then going back to Rosemary's point, it's not just how we do things, it's how we collectively do things and how we co-design that future that we want, rather than just adopting and iterating on the present that we have. Thank you all very much for your time. This will all be available later, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.